In the spring of 2025, Washington, D.C. was a city on edge. President Donald Trump had returned to the White House after a tumultuous election, and his administration was already making waves. At the center of the media storm was Karoline Leavitt, the youngest White House press secretary in history. At just 27, Leavitt had quickly become a formidable force, known for her sharp wit and unwavering loyalty to the president. Leavitt's daily press briefings had become must-watch television. She had a knack for turning the tables on reporters, often leaving them scrambling for words. Her rise was meteoric, and she was hailed by supporters as the voice of a new, unapologetic conservatism. Meanwhile, Speaker Emerita Nancy Pelosi had remained a prominent figure in the Democratic Party. Though she had stepped down from her leadership role, her influence was undiminished. Pelosi was a seasoned politician known for her strategic acumen and fierce advocacy. She had been a thorn in Trump's side during his first term and was poised to be so again. The stage was set for a confrontation that would captivate the nation. The spark that ignited the confrontation came during a routine press briefing. Leavitt was addressing questions about the administration's new immigration policy, which proposed stringent measures to curb illegal immigration. The policy had drawn sharp criticism from Democrats, with Pelosi leading the charge. A reporter asked Leavitt about Pelosi's recent comments, in which she called the policy inhumane and un-American. Leavitt, unfazed, responded, "Speaker Pelosi's comments are not only misguided but also hypocritical. This administration is committed to upholding the rule of law and protecting American citizens." The exchange made headlines and tensions escalated. A week later, the White House announced a special press conference to address the immigration policy. To everyone's surprise, Pelosi requested to attend and pose questions directly to Leavitt. The request was unprecedented, but the administration agreed, setting the stage for a historic face-off. The press room was packed. Reporters, politicians, and viewers across the country tuned in. Leavitt took the podium with her usual confidence. Pelosi stood up, microphone in hand. "Ms. Leavitt," she began, "how do you reconcile this administration's harsh immigration policies with the values enshrined in our Constitution?" Leavitt smiled. "Speaker Pelosi, this administration believes in lawful immigration. Our policies are designed to protect our borders and our citizens. We are a nation of laws." Pelosi pressed on. "But separating families and denying asylum seekers their rights is not who we are." Leavitt's response was sharp. "What's truly un-American is allowing our laws to be disregarded. This administration is restoring order and fairness to our immigration system." The room was silent. Even some Democrats appeared taken aback by Leavitt's poise and command. The confrontation dominated news cycles. Pundits debated who had come out on top. While opinions varied, many acknowledged Leavitt's performance as impressive. She had stood her ground against one of the most seasoned politicians in the country. Bill Maher, known for his critical views of both parties, commented on his show, "Leavitt showed that the new generation of conservatives isn't backing down. Whether you agree with her or not, she handled herself with remarkable composure." The incident bolstered Leavitt's profile. She became a symbol of the administration's resolve and a rising star in conservative circles. In the months that followed, Leavitt continued to be a prominent figure in the administration. Her influence grew, and she was seen as a potential future leader in the Republican Party. Pelosi, while maintaining her role as a party elder, acknowledged the changing dynamics. In a rare moment of candor, she said, "The political landscape is evolving. We must be prepared to engage with new voices and perspectives." The showdown between Leavitt and Pelosi became a defining moment in American politics, symbolizing the generational and ideological shifts shaping the nation's future. The day after the press room clash between Karoline Leavitt and Nancy Pelosi, the media was in absolute overdrive. News anchors struggled to contain their reactions, and the phrase "Leavitt shuts down Pelosi" trended across social media platforms. On YouTube and TikTok, clips of the exchange racked up millions of views within hours. One viral video titled "Pelosi Gets Owned" by Karoline Leavitt, watch until the end, was shared by conservative influencers and, surprisingly, even some moderate voices. Among them was none other than Bill Maher, whose political commentary show Real Time had long been a thorn in both Republican and Democrat sides. Known for calling out political hypocrisy, especially within the far-left progressive wing, Maher shocked his audience when he said, "Look, I'm not in the business of cheerleading for the Trump White House, but I've got to admit Karoline Leavitt had her facts straight." When Pelosi tried to get sentimental about the Constitution, Karoline came back with logic and the law. "That's how you debate on substance, not theatrics." That comment alone sent ripples through political circles. Maher, once hailed as a reliable progressive voice, had now acknowledged the competence of Trump's young press secretary. Meanwhile, the White House was flooded with calls and emails, many of them from Americans who weren't usually politically engaged. A truck driver from Ohio emailed, "I haven't watched a press briefing in years, but I just saw that girl stand up to Pelosi and speak the truth. I felt like someone finally had the guts to say what we're all thinking." Conservative commentators from Fox News to the Daily Wire hailed it as a landmark moment. Tommy Lahren called it a generational mic drop, while Tucker Carlson, back with a new digital series, claimed Karoline Leavitt might just be the smartest person in D.C. right now. But not everyone was thrilled. Progressives on the far left blasted Leavitt as cold and lacking empathy. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez tweeted, "Being able to recite immigration laws doesn't make your policies moral. The Trump admin is doubling down on cruelty, and Karoline Leavitt is just the PR face for it." Still, the criticism didn't carry the same impact. Many Americans, especially swing voters and moderate Democrats, felt something shift. Even longtime Democrat strategist James Carville admitted in a CNN panel discussion, "I hate to say it, but Pelosi walked into that room expecting to humiliate a press secretary and walked out looking like she hadn't read the new playbook. That girl came prepared." Democrats better be careful thinking they're still playing chess while the other side is rewriting the rules of the game. The generational divide within the Democratic Party was now on full display. Younger Democrats who were tuned into YouTube and Twitter expressed a different reaction. A 25-year-old liberal content creator known as J-Politics posted a thoughtful take. "I disagree with 90% of Karoline's policies. But if the Democrats want to win in 2026 and 2028, they need someone who can hold their own like she does." Pelosi was using old tactics. Karoline came with a new edge, calm, controlled, and devastating. The irony wasn't lost on political observers. Nancy Pelosi, who had once defined the archetype of the confident, media-savvy Democratic woman, had now been upstaged by a Gen Z conservative woman using her own tactics, poise, preparation, and dominance in the media spotlight. Inside the West Wing, Trump was reportedly ecstatic. Sources close to the president said he replayed the exchange multiple times in the Oval Office and jokingly told aides, "We should have put her on the debate stage." Back at home, Leavitt maintained her routine, refusing to bask in the limelight. When asked about the public's reaction during a Fox Business interview, she replied simply, "This isn't about me. It's about the truth. We're restoring law and order in America, and that means being clear, direct, and unapologetic. I respect Speaker Pelosi's service, but I won't let misinformation go unchecked, not on my watch." As the weekend arrived, both conservative and centrist voters continued discussing the moment. Independent voter forums lit up with praise. One post read, "I didn't vote for Trump last time. But if this is the kind of leadership he's surrounding himself with, young people who actually do their homework, I'm reconsidering." A political earthquake had begun, and Karoline Leavitt was the unexpected epicenter. The Monday following the explosive confrontation, the Democratic National Committee scrambled to contain the fallout. Damage control meetings were held behind closed doors at Capitol Hill, and top aides advised Speaker Emerita Nancy Pelosi to lay low for a few days. But the firestorm had already spread beyond their control. Even Pelosi's usual defenders were struggling to spin the story. On Morning Joe, co-host Mika Brzezinski offered a lukewarm defense. "Look, it was a difficult moment. Pelosi tried to appeal to shared values, but it seems the GOP has a new strategy, very polished, very tactical." And Karoline Leavitt, well, she clearly came prepared. Prepared was an understatement. Over the next few days, Leavitt doubled down, not with brashness, but with consistency. In appearances on Fox News, Newsmax, and even a surprise remote interview with ABC's George Stephanopoulos, she remained calm, articulate, and unrelenting. During the ABC interview, Stephanopoulos pressed her hard, "Ms. Leavitt, you've been praised for your composure, but many still argue that the Trump administration's immigration policies are heartless. What do you say to Americans who feel that enforcing the law leads to unnecessary suffering?" Without flinching, Karoline responded, "I say that every country has a right and a responsibility to enforce its borders. And I'd ask those same Americans, why do you think illegal immigration surged during the previous administration? Because people knew there would be no consequences. Compassion without structure is chaos. We're restoring both." It was the kind of statement that hit home for many Americans, especially in swing states like Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Arizona. As she spoke, real-time polling showed a bump in Trump administration favorability among independents. Meanwhile, liberal think tanks began issuing memos warning of a new challenge, the Leavitt effect. A report circulated among Senate Democrats stated, Karoline Leavitt poses a generational threat to our media dominance. She's young, media-savvy, unfazed under pressure, and already galvanizing public support in critical states. She is effectively reframing Trump-era policy as responsible governance, and people are listening. The tension within the Democratic Party was growing by the hour. Progressive Democrats like Ilhan Omar and Jamal Bowman called for Pelosi to step aside permanently, arguing that the old guard had become outmatched by a new kind of Republican figure. In one viral video, Omar addressed supporters at a rally in Minneapolis. We need new leadership who can push back on the right-wing machine, not just lecture about the Constitution while getting steamrolled in public. That's what happened last week, and we all saw it. To no one's surprise, Pelosi declined to comment publicly. Sources close to her admitted that the sting of the encounter with Leavitt was more humiliating than any political skirmish she'd experienced in decades. The moment had already been dubbed the Leavitt slap on political forums across Reddit, X, and YouTube, but the biggest surprise came later that week during Bill Maher's Overtime podcast, where he hosted a panel of political analysts, including one prominent Democrat strategist, Lionel Munoz. Bill turned to him and asked bluntly, "Are you worried that Karoline Leavitt just did in 10 minutes what your whole media machine couldn't do in 10 months, shift the narrative?" Munoz hesitated. "Honestly? Yes. She exposed how lazy we've gotten with messaging. We relied on moral superiority instead of meeting arguments with data. Karoline didn't yell. She didn't insult. She came in with facts and receipts. That's a problem for us." The crowd fell silent. It wasn't just the Democrats who noticed. Trump supporters were ecstatic. For years, they'd longed for someone in the administration who could communicate their values with style and precision, and now they believed they had found her. In an op-ed for the Wall Street Journal, conservative columnist Peggy Noonan wrote, Karoline Leavitt represents a political breakthrough. Not because she shouts over the left, but because she doesn't need to. She speaks plainly, she stands her ground, and most importantly, she makes you think. The phrase "makes you think" appeared again and again. Political YouTubers across the spectrum, from conservative channels like Louder with Crowder to centrist analysts like The Fifth Column, began dissecting Leavitt's rhetorical approach. Her debate strategy was methodical, and viewers found it strangely refreshing. Back in Washington, Karoline continued her press briefings with her usual poise. When asked by NBC whether she had anticipated the confrontation with Pelosi going viral, she smiled and said, "I didn't come here to go viral. I came here to serve the American people and speak truth." But that wasn't the full story. Behind the scenes, Leavitt had been preparing meticulously with senior communications advisors and policy experts. The Trump administration, aware of the intense scrutiny from media and academia, had invested heavily in developing a new generation of articulate spokespeople who could spar on any battlefield, social media, live TV, or press briefings. And Karoline wasn't just ready. She was thriving. A week after Karoline Leavitt's now legendary clash with Nancy Pelosi, she was invited to deliver a keynote at the Conservative Women's Summit in Atlanta, Georgia. It wasn't unusual for a White House press secretary to give speeches outside the Capitol, but this one had a different energy. Thousands packed into the venue, more reminiscent of a campaign rally than a professional conference. The opening applause was deafening. With American flags draping the stage and Lee Greenwood's "God Bless the USA" playing over the speakers, Leavitt walked out in a sharp navy suit, confident and composed. She opened with humor, "I guess you all saw the Pelosi thing," to roaring laughter. Then her tone shifted. "We are living in a moment where truth is treated like a threat. Where enforcing our laws is called cruelty. Where speaking up for everyday Americans is branded as extremism. But let me say this loud and clear, we are not afraid of the truth. We are reclaiming it." The speech, lasting just under 20 minutes, was immediately praised by conservatives and even some independents for its clarity. She quoted statistics about immigration, referenced bipartisan polling on border security, and concluded by invoking unity over division. This isn't about right or left. It's about common sense. It's about country before politics. Social media blew up once again. Hashtags like #Leavitt2028 and #TruthBeforeTears trended for 2 days straight. Fox News host Jesse Waters called it the most important speech by a non-elected official since Reagan's 1964, a time for choosing. But not everyone was celebrating. Back in Washington, the Democratic Party's internal fracture was widening. Younger members were furious that Pelosi hadn't issued a counterstatement while the older leadership was trying to pretend the incident was already behind them. Congressman Eric Swalwell tried to defend Pelosi on CNN, saying, "Nancy's track record speaks for itself. She doesn't need to respond to every viral moment." But his defense fell flat. CNN's own post-segment poll showed that 58% of viewers believed Leavitt won the confrontation, while only 17% said Pelosi had the upper hand. The rest were unsure. The most damning moment came when Democratic Senator Kyrsten Sinema, now an independent but still caucusing with the Democrats, gave her thoughts during a university Q&A. "You know, I've had disagreements with this administration, but Karoline Leavitt was impressive. Not because she humiliated someone, but because she did what few people in politics do. She told the truth clearly and didn't apologize for it." That quote made headlines across both conservative and centrist news outlets. Suddenly, Leavitt wasn't just a conservative hero, she was a bipartisan symbol of clear communication in an era defined by spin. Behind the scenes, President Donald Trump took note. According to leaked reports from the West Wing, he summoned Leavitt for a private meeting in the Oval Office. One aide described the atmosphere as jubilant, with Trump reportedly telling her, "You've got the guts and the brains. Reminds me of when I first took on CNN. But you're sharper, cleaner. You're the future, Karoline." The praise wasn't just flattery. There was already talk within MAGA circles about Leavitt being groomed for higher office or, at the very least, a permanent leadership role in shaping the party's future communication strategy. Meanwhile, mainstream media struggled to figure out how to frame her without inadvertently boosting her credibility. MSNBC aired a primetime segment titled "The Dangerous Rise of Karoline Leavitt," warning viewers that her appeal masks a deeply radical policy agenda. But the more they tried to diminish her, the more her support seemed to grow. On The View, co-host Sarah Haynes, typically cautious with conservative praise, said what many were thinking: "I don't agree with her politics, but let's be honest. Karoline knows her stuff. She's young, she's articulate, and she doesn't lose her temper. That's more than I can say for some members of our own party." The moment was met with stunned silence, followed by a rare, awkward pause from Joy Behar. Across the country, regular Americans were speaking up too. A retired schoolteacher from Michigan told a local paper, "I'm a lifelong Democrat, but watching Karoline, I felt like I was listening to someone who actually respects us, who respects facts. I haven't felt that in a long time." At the same time, suburban moms in swing districts began posting videos under the hashtag #KarolineKeepsItReal, describing how Leavitt's response to Pelosi felt refreshing after years of what they described as party lines and platitudes. In battleground states like Wisconsin and Pennsylvania, GOP operatives noticed a shift. Their internal polling showed a 5-point swing among independent women between the ages of 30 and 45, a demographic that had largely soured on Trump in previous cycles. And it all traced back to one moment, one confrontation, one woman who refused to back down from a political icon. Karoline Leavitt had not only shut down Pelosi, she had reopened the possibility that a new kind of conservatism, one that communicated clearly and unapologetically, could win the middle of America again. As the dust began to settle from what was now being dubbed the showdown at the podium, the effects rippled far beyond Washington. Karoline Leavitt was no longer just the White House press secretary, she had become a cultural lightning rod, a political archetype for a new generation of Republicans, and perhaps most surprisingly, a reluctant unifier among independents and center-left voters disillusioned with the Democratic Party's establishment. Despite pressure from key Democratic donors and House leadership, Nancy Pelosi remained silent. Her staff issued a tepid statement calling the exchange a distraction from the real issues. But that only fueled speculation. Was she humiliated? Was she being protected by party elders? Or was this simply the end of her relevance in a party moving on without her? The Washington Post ran a blistering op-ed titled, "When Silence Speaks Loudest," stating, "Pelosi's refusal to engage following her dismissal by Leavitt isn't strength, it's surrender. And in the battlefield of modern politics, silence is political death." Privately, even DNC officials admitted they had lost the news cycle, lost the narrative, and possibly lost a generation of voters who now see Pelosi as a relic. It was Bill Maher, however, who dropped the biggest cultural grenade. On his HBO show Real Time, he delivered a monologue that instantly went viral. "You know what's funny? The Democrats used to be the party of working people. Now they're the party of college-educated snobs who think facts are microaggressions. And when someone like Karoline Leavitt, who's smart, media-savvy, and actually believes in something, comes along, the best Nancy Pelosi can do is scoff. Sorry, but she got owned. The audience gave a mix of laughs and gasps, but Mar didn't flinch. Maybe, just maybe, if Democrats stopped lecturing and started listening, they wouldn't keep losing ground to people like Leavitt. Because here's the truth. She didn't shut down Pelosi with hate. She shut her down with facts. And that scares the left more than anything. The clip amassed 12 million views within 48 hours, shared by conservatives, libertarians, and yes, even some moderates who had previously mocked the Trump administration. Inside the White House, the Trump team was already capitalizing. Posters emerged in conservative bookstores with the phrase truth, clarity, courage under Leavitt's image. Rumors swirled that President Trump wanted to give her a more prominent role in the re-election campaign, perhaps even floating the idea of her being press secretary and deputy campaign chair. Trump himself addressed the speculation during a packed rally in Arizona. You all saw what Karoline did to Pelosi, boom. She didn't just handle it. She destroyed the lies. She's the best press secretary we've ever had, folks. Maybe one day we'll be saying, Madam President. Who knows? The crowd roared with approval. Meanwhile, Democrats scrambled to contain the fallout. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Ilhan Omar tried to counter with fiery press appearances, but their confrontational tone only highlighted what Leavitt had done right. She had remained cool, confident, and factual. Even left-wing pundits like Crystal Ball and Matt Taibbi noted that Leavitt represented a dangerous opponent not because she was extreme, but because she was polished and persuasive. In a closed-door strategy meeting, a Democratic consultant was overheard saying, "This is like 2016 all over again. We're underestimating the messenger just because we don't like the message." Toward the end of the month, Karoline was invited to deliver the commencement address at Liberty University. While it wasn't a political speech, its message was unmistakably aimed at a larger future. Your generation doesn't want platitudes. You want principles. You don't want filters, you want facts. And most of all, you want leaders who serve, not lecture. The crowd of young graduates rose to their feet in a thunderous standing ovation. Conservative commentators called it a presidential-caliber address. CNN described it as a savvy mix of Reagan-esque optimism and Trump-era bravado. That night, #Leavitt2028 trended once again. Karoline Leavitt's moment with Nancy Pelosi wasn't just a viral takedown, it was the spark that ignited a movement. In a time when trust in institutions was collapsing and politicians were viewed as out of touch or over-rehearsed, she cut through the noise. She represented a generation raised on chaos, hungry for clarity, and tired of excuses. And while Nancy Pelosi quietly faded from the headlines, Karoline Leavitt was just getting started with a commanding voice, an iron spine, and a no-nonsense brand of leadership. She had done what few thought possible. She had shut down a political titan in front of America, and even Democrats had to admit she won.